Two candidates vying to become Oregon's top lawyer to tackle abortion rights, gun violence, and the fentanyl crisis.
The question is, how can the Attorney General partner with law enforcement to really tackle some of these biggest challenges?
We need laws, but more importantly right now, we need somebody who knows how to enforce the laws.
The former state speaker of the House taking on a former prosecutor for the seat that's wide open for the first time in over a decade. Debate night in Oregon, the race for Attorney General.
Two candidates vying to be the state of Oregon's top lawyer facing off here in the KOIN 6 studios. Thanks for joining us. I'm KOIN 6 Political Director Ken Boddy. I'll be moderating tonight's debate between the candidates for Oregon Attorney General. The Attorney General heads the Oregon Department of Justice, which serves as the state's law firm. The Oregon DOJ employs about 1,300 people statewide and has a biennial budget of $550 million. The nonpartisan office of Attorney General is now held by Ellen Rosenblum, who chose not to run for re-election. We are partnering with the City Club of Portland for tonight's debate. Founded in 1916, nonprofit Portland City Club's mission is to provide civic education, spur civic engagement, and to motivate the community to action. Now let's meet our candidates, both accomplished attorneys. First, Will Lathrop. He's a former deputy district attorney in Yamhill and Marion counties, and an office director for the International Justice Mission, which does humanitarian work in countries including Africa. He's a Republican. Dan Rayfield, a Democrat, has served in the Oregon House of Representatives since 2015. Rayfield served as Speaker of the Oregon House from 2022 to March of this year. Now, before we begin, here are the rules for tonight's debate. Each candidate will get a 1-minute opening statement, and then I will ask a number of questions, and each candidate will get 1 minute to respond to each one. If a follow-up or rebuttal is needed, each candidate will get 30 seconds for that. And at the end of our debate, each candidate will get a 1-minute closing statement with no rebuttals. Now it's time for opening statements, and Mr. Rayfield, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Ken. My name is Dan Rayfield, and I am the Democratic candidate for Attorney General here in Oregon. And I'm running for Attorney General because I believe the Attorney General's office, with the right leadership, the leadership that I want to bring to this office, can be an indispensable partner to solve our community's greatest challenges. I bring with me 18 years of experience representing individuals against corporations and other entities. I also bring with me 10 years of legislative experience, 2 of which I served as the Speaker of the Oregon House, where we worked to expand access to health care, increase funding for education, and most recently we partnered with law enforcement to get hard drugs off of our streets. As your next Attorney General, I want to work and build on that to create safer communities by tackling our drug addiction crisis across this state. I believe we need to expand the work we do to protect seniors, consumers, and working families. And finally, we need an Attorney General that matches our values in this state, someone that will stand up to national attacks to reproductive health as well as attacks on our environmental laws.
Mr. Lathrop, 1 minute.
Thank you, Ken. Hello, my name is Will Lathrop, and I'm running to be Oregon's next Attorney General. I've worked in victim protection and law enforcement for the last 20 years. I started my career as a child sex abuse prosecutor here in Oregon, but then went to do that work at the national level. And from there, I was hired to lead multinational teams in Africa to rescue human trafficking victims and protect widows from land violence. For the last decade, like so many other people, I've watched as Oregon's leadership has consistently failed crime victims, and we've become, because of bad policy, consistently bottom 10 in almost every category. I'm running to be a wave of new leadership that's going to focus on accountability and protecting victims of crime and not radical politics. The Attorney General is Oregon's chief law enforcement officer, and in that role, I'm going to take on drug trafficking. I'm going to push drug traffickers out of our state. I'm going to protect children. That's what I've done my whole career, and I'm going to combat corruption. These are not partisan things, they're just good governance, and we need to get back to good governance so people in Oregon can start to thrive. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited for this discussion.
Thank you both, gentlemen. The duties of the Oregon Attorney General are vast. Our current Attorney General has put a strong focus on consumer protection as well as civil rights. Now, if elected, what areas and issues will you prioritize? And we'll start this answer with Mr. Lathrop.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, priority number 1 is that the Attorney General is supposed to run point on all organized crime. That's drug trafficking, human trafficking, and organized retail theft. All 3 of those things are astronomically high in the state of Oregon because of a failure of leadership. So my first order of business is to take on drug trafficking and the drug cartel. People are making millions of dollars off of exploiting addiction and crushing communities, and we need to make it exceedingly difficult to bring fentanyl and meth into our state. The second is child protection. Oregon has become an objectively unhealthy place to raise children. We have seen a huge influx of online sexual exploitation of children. DHS is housing foster children in hotel rooms. And across the state, the addiction crisis is most negatively affecting our children. And so I've got 20 years of protecting children from violence, exploitation, and abuse. And finally, it's just corruption. We need to hold people who misuse their office or misuse public funds accountable. And as a 20-year law enforcement officer, I plan to do that. Thank you, Ken.
Mr. Rayfield, same question, your priorities.
Well, thank you, Ken. And I think you correctly pointed out that it takes a diverse background to do all of the work of the Department of Justice. The first priority that I have in this role is to keep our communities safe. And that means tackling the drug delivery issues in all four corners of our state. That also means keeping our children safe from internet crimes. It also means that we need an Attorney General that is going to be the Attorney General for all Oregonians. That means expanding the work that we do to protect our seniors, our consumers, and our working families. And that's from things like wage theft, fly-by-night scams that come in and out of our communities, and many other things like predatory lending. And finally, one of the most important things that you need out of your Attorney General is you need an Attorney General that is going to defend Oregon's values. Right now, more than ever, we have attacks to reproductive health. We have attacks on our environmental laws. We have attacks on our election laws. And I will be here to represent Oregonians' values and to defend them against national attacks.
The Attorney General can be likened to the CEO of a law office with nearly a $500 million budget and roughly 1,500 employees, between 1,300 and 1,500. What prepares you for this administrative responsibility? And I'll start with Mr. Rayfield.
Thank you, Ken. The first and most important thing you need to have is you need to have a solid and diverse legal background, and that's something that I have. In my private practice for 18 years, I represented individuals against corporate companies and insurance companies. At the same time, I managed a law practice in that space. Incredibly important, and it relates to a lot of the civil work that the Department of Justice does. Number two, I bring my experience and my reputation in the legislature as someone who has been able to bring Republicans and Democrats together to solve some of our community's greatest challenges. We look at the significant housing reform packages. We did that with bipartisan work. We brought Republicans and Democrats together to give law enforcement tools to get hard drugs off the street. I will do that in the Attorney General's office. Additionally, it's important, when I served as Speaker of the House, you manage a branch of government that has a budget of more than $400 million and 400 employees, and that directly translates. And then you also have to have a vision for 100% of this job, and that's something that I do.
Mr. Lathrop.
Yeah, I've been leading for almost the last decade. I've been leading multinational teams in 2 different countries. First in East Africa to combat land violence against widows and orphans, and then in West Africa to prevent human trafficking, child trafficking, really. And in that time, I've had to learn I've got a law experience in Oregon, I've got law experience nationally, I've got law experience internationally, and my role required me to partner with the U.S. State Department, UNICEF, and multiple foreign governments to come together to drive towards a solution that was really, really important. And that's what I bring to this job. I bring a multitude of experience, multinational, multicultural experience, and the ability to partner with other governments and other entities to get a result done. Leaders are known by their culture and are known by their results. And my leadership was regularly rated as one of the highest in my company. And leadership is known by our results in Oregon, and the results are not good. We've seen what has happened. We've seen the legislation and the policies that have driven us to be in bottom 10 in almost every single category in the state of Oregon.
As a follow-up, Mr. Rayfield, I'll give you a chance to talk about, respond to the legislative accusations that what has happened in the legislature since you were Speaker of the House has contributed to some of the issues that we're having with the Attorney General's office.
Thank you, Ken. I'm incredibly proud of the work that we did as Speaker of the Oregon House. We built a universal reputation of bringing people together. Again, we passed one of the most significant housing reform packages hand in hand with Republicans. We did something when I was Speaker of the House that nobody thought was possible. We brought Republicans together, district attorneys, law enforcement officers together to strengthen our drug enforcement laws in the state to get hard drugs off the street, while at the same time expanding treatment for people suffering from substance abuse. I'm very proud of the record that I have.
Mr. Lathrop, would you like to respond to that?
We can talk about things that you're proud about. What I'm not proud of is that Oregon is almost dead last in how we care for people with mental health disorders. We're almost dead last in fentanyl. We are dead last in fentanyl overdoses, crime, addiction, affordable housing, a fragile economy. Our public school system, if you point a stick at it in Oregon right now, we're bad at it. So if my opponent is proud of his record, I just think we expect more. I expect Oregon to be excellent at every single category, and I'll lead that as the next Attorney General.
Let's move on to the issue of elder abuse. The Attorney General's office has a significant role in addressing elder abuse. How do you view that role, and what steps would you take in fulfilling that role? And we'll start with Mr. Lathrop on this one.
Yeah, my wife works for a university, and she went out recently to visit one of the former alumni, and that person was she was in her 80s or 90s, and my wife showed up, and this woman had memory care problems, didn't have a driver's license, and asked my wife to give her food because her cupboard was completely bare. So my wife came out for a university event to visit, ended up going to the grocery store, restocking this woman's house, called DHS to make a report that this person was really living in a very vulnerable and very dangerous state. And DHS said they were already aware of the situation, and they were monitoring it they were stopping by every month. When we have lawlessness, when we have predatory behavior, when you can't ride the metro because it's dangerous, there's grocery stores are moving out of neighborhoods, it's seniors that feel it first and seniors that feel it worst. I've handled elder abuse crimes. I've handled many of them. I will protect elders from abuse. I will protect them from exploitation. It's what I've always done, and we need to turn the tide.
Mr. Rayfield.
Aging Oregonians are some of the most vulnerable populations here in this state. Something that I've worked on in private practice during my 18 years. And there's three areas that I would really focus on when it comes to elder abuse. One is education. We have to improve our education on the front end, and we have a protection and education fund that we can expand here in this state, because the ideal is that we stop it before it happens, because often after it happens, it's very difficult to get results. Number two, after we've expanded and focused on education, then we really need to think about our civil enforcement, and that's something that we already do, and I talk about that a lot, being the Attorney General for all Oregonians, and that includes our aging Oregonians, and expanding that work in that civil side, and that's trying to help them get their money back in certain situations. And then as the last result, you move into the criminal context, and that's where you come into our criminal justice division within the Department of Justice, where we can hold people accountable for their criminal actions, and that's something that I will do as your next Attorney General.
Let's go to the other end of the age spectrum there in terms of child abuse. The Attorney General also charged with protecting children from parents suspected of child abuse. How can the Attorney General's office intervene in child abuse cases while respecting the rights of parents to raise children consistent with their family values? And we'll start with Mr. Rayfield for that.
And again, Ken, this is another population that is incredibly vulnerable in our state with our children. At the first end, as the Attorney General, you need to partner with law enforcement on the front lines where we think about traditional child abuse in our communities, and that's something that would go on. As you move into the civil context, one of the areas of child abuse that we don't talk about that I want to expand with the Working Families Unit is actually going after child labor violations. These are things that are going on in our state right now. Then we need to think about, there is the criminal side. So we're thinking about internet crimes against children. As Speaker of the Oregon House, we added resources to the Department of Justice to better tackle this issue. And human trafficking. Human trafficking is something that will affect a child's life in their entire life. And then finally, the one thing that I think it is really important that we don't talk about, and for the parents out there, we think about social media and the impacts that social media has on the behavioral health of our children, and how do we curb that long term as from the Attorney General's office? And
Mr. Lathrop, same question.
Thank you. I'm deeply concerned about how Oregon is protecting children. We're bottom 10 in teen suicide, teen overdose. DHS is housing children and fostering children in hotel rooms illegally. We've seen a 530% increase in online exploitation of children cases in the state of Oregon. We're one of the worst at dealing with online exploitation of children. We're one of the worst states in the country for addiction. We all know that in homes of addiction, children are 4 times more likely to be criminally mistreated, and 3 more times more likely to be sexually abused, sexually assaulted. We have to push drug trafficking out of our state. We have to build a safety net around our children and protect them from online sexual exploitation. And we need to start caring for our kids that are in foster care, because if we don't, we're creating the next generation of drug seekers and the next generation of people that will experience homelessness. And this is my background. I've done it for 20 years. I'm an expert in it, and I'm going to make a change.
I'd like to have a follow-up 30 seconds for both of you to answer this. Now, Oregon is chronically underfunded child protective services. If elected, can you do anything to address that reality? Mr. Rayfield.
Yeah, funding of things is traditionally a legislative responsibility in that space. I believe that any statewide elected official has a duty and an obligation to use their soapbox to advocate for good policy in this state. And this is obviously one area where I think the Attorney General's office can have a meaningful impact on actually increasing the funding. But also importantly, we need to cut through some of the red tape to allow some of our frontline workers to actually help children, because that will make better resources to our children and be more effective uses of taxpayer dollars.
Mr. Lathrop, funding for child protective services.
Really a bifurcated answer to that. One is that we have our funding for online sexual exploitation of children, ICAC cases. Our funding is embarrassingly low. Idaho has 21 investigators. Currently, our Department of Justice has 5. Idaho has half of our population. But I also think we make the mistake in DHS or child welfare of thinking that throwing more money at things is going to make it better. But Oregon also has a real problem with accountability of the funds that were used. So I want to be a person that holds public officials accountable to use their money on the things that will actually matter.
Let's move on to the subject of fentanyl and public safety. The massive influx of fentanyl into cities and states across this nation, including here in Oregon, is a significant concern for a lot of voters. What role does the Attorney General's office play, or what role will you play as our next Attorney General in addressing the fentanyl crisis? And we start with Mr. Rayfield.
And what I would tell you is this has been an emerging issue since 2020 and has really grown pretty intensely in this state. As Speaker of the House, we brought together earlier this year Democrats, Republicans, law enforcement officers, as well as district attorneys to tighten down and give law enforcement tools to combat drug delivery. We also added resources into the Department of Justice, lawyers and investigators to go after drug delivery in that space. And at the same time, we increased funding because we have to know what the problem is. And the root cause of this problem is substance abuse. And all of us have faced that, whether it's in our personal lives or with friends that we know. And so by doing all of those comprehensive things, that was the first start. From the Attorney General's office, where the nexus comes is really tackling drug delivery with the resources that the legislature recently allocated and being able to lead and coordinate with federal, state, and local law enforcement entities to get better results.
And Mr. Lathrop.
Currently, Oregon is seeing a 20% increase in fentanyl overdose deaths, while the rest of the United States has seen a 12% decrease. We're going the wrong way by a long ways. And so whatever we're doing right now, whatever laws have been passed or things that we're boasting about are not working. Fentanyl is not made in Oregon. It's made in China, it's processed in Mexico, and it's brought here by a foreign drug cartel that's highly organized. The Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer of the state and should be running point on all organized crime investigations. That's drug trafficking, human trafficking, and organized retail theft. And we're struggling with all of those things, but mostly drug trafficking. I have international law experience. I've been taking on international crime syndicates for the last 8 years, and I've had a lot of success at doing it. The Attorney General's office needs leadership and needs somebody who will stand up to the foreign drug cartels, is not scared to say the word drug trafficking, is not scared to say the word drug cartel, and will push these people that are making so much money off of killing Oregonians out of our state.
And I want to follow up to that because there's been much talk about fentanyl coming across the southern border especially. We're not a border state, however, we are impacted by that. How do you address that part of the fentanyl crisis? I'll give you 30 seconds each to talk about that.
Yeah, the Attorney General should do a much better job at partnering with DEA and the FBI and Interpol in driving these cases out of our state, out of state lines, across federal lines, and holding the people that are at the top of these organized criminal operations accountable. It's not being done. We got to cut the head of the snake off. I've done that in another context in West Africa, and I'll do that again when I'm elected as Attorney General.
And Mr. Rayfield, same question.
Yeah, there's a lot of commonality on the answer to this question. The Attorney General's office plays a very important role to address the fentanyl delivery crisis here in this state. A couple of things that I think we're very interested in is the organized crime section within the Criminal Justice Division, working to make sure that we're making fentanyl delivery, as well as all other drug delivery, a priority in this state to address the cartels. Additionally, one of the things that I'm interested in doing and would pledge to do in the first 6 months is go to the legislature. I would like to add a specific criminal justice attorney into the executive office of the Department of Justice so they can lead this effort statewide.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about the issue of abortion. Current AG Rosenblum recently joined 7 other states' attorneys general to remove restrictions on the abortion drug mifepristone. Do you agree with that level of involvement and advocacy on the part of the Attorney General's office? And what role should the Attorney General play in protecting abortion rights for women in Oregon? Mr. Lathrop?
The Attorney General is a law enforcement position, not a law creation position, and the law in Oregon has been well settled. The Dobbs decision in 2022 didn't affect Oregon's law at all. It's a well settled law. It's my job to enforce the law, and I'll do it well. And I think that what Oregonians are really concerned about is who can they trust when they're elected to protect women? And I think my background in prosecuting domestic violence cases, sexual assault cases here in Oregon, and internationally leaves me in the best place to protect women.
What about the restrictions on abortion drugs that current AG Rosenblum is going after? In your office, would you do something like that?
There are no restrictions in the state of Oregon on abortion drugs. That's well settled law, and I will continue that practice.
And Mr. Rayfield?
This is a wonderful, clear difference between the two of us. Things are well settled law until they're not well settled law. And that's what you're seeing here. And this is a wonderful pivot by opponent not to talk about a really critical issue. As Attorney General, I will be there to defend Oregon women from a national abortion ban. And what that looks like is when the federal government passes a national abortion ban, that law will be in conflict with our Oregon laws. And you can count on me to defend Oregon laws and abortion.
Mr. Lathrop, would you like to respond to Mr. Rayfield saying that this is something that you don't want to deal with?
Well, I don't know that Vice President Harris is going to institute an abortion ban. I don't know. I know that Trump said he hasn't, so it seems like we're having a conversation about unlikely hypotheticals. But the reality is that my opponent talks about protecting women. He was arrested for shooting at a car full of women. He has defended people who have sexually assaulted women in court, and he has covered up sexual allegations in the legislature by staffers. So I don't think that he's in a good position to call me out on protecting women. I don't think that's going to work.
Mr. Rayfield, I'll give you a chance to rebut that.
And this is exactly why Mr. Lathrop should not be Oregon's next Attorney General. He knows better. He should have done his research before the facts that he's talked about. When you run to be the Attorney General for all of Oregon, you cannot come on a live debate stage, misrepresent facts, pivot away from issues that all women in Oregon want to know about. And I think it is very telling, the demeanor and the tone that he's taken here in this debate.
What facts did he misrepresent?
What I would talk about specifically, he's making allegations with respect to things that have not been reported under sexual harassment. That has no basis in fact. Some of the allegations that he makes about my past when I was 17, 18 years old are misrepresentations, and they're intended to mislead the Oregon public so he can gain a political advantage. That is dishonest. It's misrepresentation, and people like that, it was part of what the problem is with politics today.
Mr. Lathrop, are you misrepresenting Mr. Rayfield's record?
Mr. Rayfield was arrested for shooting out a car full of women and paid his way out of it. If you read the paper last week, Mr. Rayfield is implicated in the Janelle Bynum scandal, where a staffer reported a sexual assault of an underage victim, and it was reported to Mr. Rayfield, who's a mandatory reporter. He didn't make that report. In fact, he worked to cover it up. And for him to call out my integrity when his integrity is so clearly on the line is a classic political move of smoke screen and oil slicks. His record stands for itself.
I'm very disappointed.
And Mr. Rayfield, before we move on, I'll give you one last chance to respond to Mr. Lathrop's accusations.
Yeah. As Attorney General, one of the things that you cannot do is go on to Twitter, look at different allegations on Twitter. You can't go on to unverified reports and then come on television and make unverified accusations as though they are truth. That is what is tearing apart the fabric of our democracy, and that is exactly why Mr. Lathrop cannot be the Attorney General in this state.
Let's move on. Let's talk about domestic terrorism. The Oregon Titan Fusion Center was created within the Oregon Department of Justice. They do surveillance and threat assessments related to possible domestic terrorism. As Attorney General, how will you conduct threat assessments while protecting the privacy of Oregonians, as well as their ability to peacefully protest? And we start with Mr. Rayfield for this answer.
Thank you for the question, Ken. During my tenure in the legislature, and most recently, we actually strengthened our domestic terrorism laws, better defining domestic terrorism, while actually creating protections for protesting in that same space. I want to continue that work, obviously, as the Attorney General. The Titan Fusion Center is there to coordinate a prevention and also response by gathering information and partnering with federal, local, and state law enforcement agencies in that prevention and response category. I will continue that work while maintaining people's privacy, but the safety of Oregonians matters the most in this scenario. I think a perfect example of how it has been done right was under Attorney General Frohnmeyer when we had biological terrorism in the state. He set up a task force to work between federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies to investigate and prosecute while maintaining people's privacy and the safety of all Oregonians.
Mr. Lathrop.
Yeah, this cannot be, the Attorney General position cannot be a political position. It has to be a law enforcement position. In organized crime, drug trafficking, human trafficking, organized retail theft, political crime is also one of those crimes. Absolutely, people have a right, a constitutional right under the First Amendment to peaceably protest, but they don't have a right to use violence or intimidation or lawlessness to get their point across. And Oregon has a checkered history over the last 5 or 10 years of Proud Boys on the right or Antifa on the left, consistently using violence, intimidation, and lawlessness to either quiet other people's voices or to get their point across, and I'll have zero tolerance for it. We need to enforce our laws, and we need to make sure that people are safe to peaceably protest and that we don't have a tolerance or a culture of violent protests in Oregon. So I'll work very hard to hold people accountable. Thank you.
Oregon has a history of protest, some violent, some not. As Attorney General, how do you pick and choose which of those cases that you will get involved with and prosecute? And Mr. Rayfield, I'll let you answer that question first.
Yeah, it's very funny. The first political event I ever went to was with my dad, who was a Republican, and it was actually a fundraiser for Vice President Dan Quayle downtown Portland, and there was protesters outside at that time. And I think you have to be very cautious in the way that you value free speech and protesting in that space. Most of the prosecution is done at the local level through law enforcement and as well as your district attorneys. So what's your role and responsibility of the Attorney General's office is to be able to come in and be a support network under those circumstances. But again, you do need to prioritize the ability for people to peacefully protest while at the same time balancing safety in our communities.
And Mr. Lathrop.
I mean, it's Oregon. We love our activism. We love to celebrate our independence. We love to make sure that everybody has a voice and everybody is heard. And just lately, there's this growing concern, I guess not even a concern, this growing pattern of people using violence and intimidation and lawlessness to silence other people or to get their point across. And so it's really not hard. And Oregonians know what I'm talking about. We love to have strong opinions about things. We love to protest. It needs to be done peaceably. If not, people have to be held accountable.
That's it for the first half of our debate for Oregon Attorney General. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this.